Good day, brethren. The good captain here from Captain's Custom Works, and I want to talk to you guys a little more about some handmade instruments. This is the third installment in this series, and we're going to talk about the Kamele Ngoni today. Now, if you haven't watched the second installment in this series about the Ngoni, I recommend you do so, because the Ngoni is what the Kamele Ngoni grew out of. As we discussed in the second one, the Ngoni translates roughly to hunter's harp. It's a very traditional instrument that people would play when, out taking long hunting treks, Nowadays, especially here in the States, we like to think about hunting as, you grab a couple beers, go out with your buddies, spend a day, maybe a weekend, but when you're sleeping, you're in a cabin or a very, very nice tent or something. Way back at the dawn of mankind, and for millennia afterward, hunting was a different thing. Hunting was a way of life, and you went out for a week or more at a time, with a group of people, and then you'd come back to, your encampment or whatever, village, town, whatever the size it was at the time. You'd come back and you'd bring back the entire haul from your hunting, and that was your subsistence. So obviously when you go out, if you're a musician, like I assume some of you are, you know that you don't go anywhere without saying, well, we got to bring a little instrument to have a little fun. Well, that's the Ngoni. That's where it came from. That's why it was the hunter's harp. The Kamele Ngoni, on the other hand, translates roughly to young man's harp, which is a little bit sarcastic. This is because, all those young folk, the young Turks within the last century only said, this is a really cool instrument, but we want to do more with it. We want to be able to play more like what we want to play nowadays, And so this grew out of it. This is a 12-string version, but these come in all range of strings, and they're usually tuned pretty much strictly pentatonically, a little more standard to our Western ears than the Ngoni is. As with a lot of traditional instruments, again, the tuning can be highly dependent on the region, from which one hails, although that's beginning to change as time goes on, obviously. People hear things and they say, I like this, I like that, so you can no longer recognize a musician, from the town he comes from. Like this. Here I am in northern Illinois, building a traditional African instrument. 100 years ago that wouldn't have happened. But thanks to the miracle of the world, it can. I'd also like to tell a little story about how this happened with me. This is a little personal, and just add that little personal touch for you guys. I first noticed this instrument. I won't say I first saw it, but the first time I really said, I want to know about that, is when a couple years ago I was lucky enough to play a festival at which the headliners are an excellent band called Tubab Crew. Some of you may be familiar with them. If you're not, look them up now. They're amazing. One of their guys played not only the Kamele Ngoni like this, but also a kora, which is a much larger 21-string, very traditional instrument. But I noticed his Kamele Ngoni not only because he played it excellently, and when he played it I could tell he had a background in percussion, which was confirmed when he started jumping off between instruments, throwing in some percussion here and there. All these guys are trading off on different instruments and stuff, really, really excellent. And I also could tell when he picked this thing up, or his version, because this isn't his, this is mine. He picked up his, and there's a bright pink steel body on it, and I said, I could recognize that from farther away than I am. That is a Freon tank, because I make drums out of those. I know those things. So I tracked him down after they got off stage, being lucky enough to get backstage access with my musician's pass, and I said, I don't want to be rude, but I have to talk to you, and thankfully, nicest dude one could ever imagine, and he said, I'd love to tell you all about my instruments. So sure enough, his was made out of a Freon tank. He said I believe the teacher of his teacher made that instrument and gave it to him. And I said, well, I've got to build one because that's the sweetest thing. So that was partly the inspiration between using the Freon tank to mine, although I've done it differently than his was, because you never want to just crib somebody's style outright, but you can take good inspiration from it when people have good ideas and put your own twist on it. That's what you should do with art and music. And so I made this, and I also was lucky enough to get some real good information from one of my favorite ethnomusicologists, I guess you could say. His name is Dennis Havlina. He's also on these here YouTubes a little bit. You should look up some of his stuff. I learned a lot from him about some drum making, and so I looked up some more of his work and discovered that he'd done extensive work with the kora. So I tried building a kora first. Doesn't suit me as well. It's a chromatic instrument instead of pentatonic. This is more familiar to my percussionist brain. And so I was lucky enough to get a little correspondence with him. I wrote Mr. Havlina and said, you know, I've been inspired by your work in the past. I'm, you know, thrilled to be learning more from you now, and this is what I'm trying to do. And he was kind enough to write me back and be very encouraging. So I first built a kora, and then I built this Kamele Ngoni. And that long rambling over, I should play you some music on it, because I love this thing. It's a lot of fun. This one's tuned to what would be traditional from the Burkinabe region, Burkina Faso and the like. I originally tuned this to the Bobo regional tuning. I like this better. It's a little different. Maybe you'll see why in the future, because I've got a drum that this pairs with beautifully in this tuning. So I'll have to try to remind myself, and you out there in the ether, feel free to remind me in your comments and screaming on the street or what have you. Remind me as well. Continue making music if you like the music I'm making, and maybe I'll show you how some of these things go together. But for now, let me play this. Well, I hope you found that somewhat interesting, and I hope you're enjoying this series of handmade instruments. And if you like it, I'll try to continue to do more. I'm always tinkering with more instruments and trying to get some of them even offered for sale in my shop. So if that's something that strikes your fancy, maybe track that down. And hopefully we will see you before too long. Thank you very much. Much love.